In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan, Frye, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Lizzie Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Bryan Frye, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Dustin Melbardis. How are you doing, Dustin?
Evening, Bryan. Doing very well. Excited about this movie tonight.
He is down in actually chilly Texas right now. Very chilly. Like, hell froze over chilly.
Down here. Yeah, it's wild. It's beautiful in its own way, but nobody down here is used to this.
And also, coming to you from the Lilac City here with me is Andreas Margraf. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to hit you a couple warm-up questions here. We'll start off with Andreas. If you will tell me, what's the last movie you saw?
The last movie that I saw was in theaters, actually. It was Tar with Kate Blanchett, directed by Todd Field. Incredible. If I were to go particularly technically, I want to say maybe best movie of the year. Really crazy. So, highly recommend.
Excellent. Dustin, what you got, man? What was your last film?
Well, I was kind of in a Star Wars mood recently, and after watching A New Hope, I think we even talked a little bit about space battles. So I really wanted to see some of that. So I actually popped in Return of the Jedi while I was getting some other things done around the house, and of course the obligatory. I'm in the middle of something else, but like, ooh, spaceships. I'm just going to stand in front of the TV and watch for a little bit and then get back to it. But Return of the Jedi for me.
Heck yeah.
Excellent. For me, I watched Viggo Mortensen in Crimes of the Future. It is quite a strange movie. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys do too. But yeah, it's different. Also, let's go with Andreas here. What is your favorite Robin Williams movie? He's Taken Too Soon, did some great works in comedy and drama.
Unquestionably. I would love to say what we're talking about today, but that would be too easy. I am going to go with Jumanji because that is such a childhood movie for me. Absolutely loved what he brought to it and made it just something unforgettable for me.
Dustin, what you got, brother?
I'm going with Hook. That's not just a childhood movie. It got a huge resurgence for me in college because all of the low brass at the University of Tennessee loved playing the pirate theme from that song, and it was just a everyday occurrence. We would hear that. In fact, so much so that we had, I think, every tuba and every baritone dress up like pirates, and Captain Hook. I was Rufio. We had a whole big thing going on. A strange fascination with that movie. But Hook is my favorite Robin Williams. It was hard not to say 1 hour photo.
I got so excited when he started doing his branch offs from his Mrs. Doubtfire-ness. I literally couldn't pick between these two. I love them both for different reasons, but the two I put down were Insomnia and What Dreams May Come.
Dreams May Come. I had a feeling. Yeah.
What Dreams May Come, first off, blew me away as a visual piece. Like, it's like, I know that's not really Robin Williams' part in it, but when you inject an actor of his caliber into basically this crazy Dante's Inferno-esque journey that he takes in this film, it was awesome. Insomnia is actually just one of my favorite psychological thrillers, and the way that he played off of Al Pacino in that, it's seriously one of the most interestingly atmospheric thrillers I've ever watched.
Sounds rad. I actually haven't seen Insomnia.
All right, so are we ready to talk about our movie today?
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Today's movie is Good Will Hunting, starring, as the aforementioned Robin Williams, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Stellan Skarsgard, as well as Minnie Driver. This was released in 1997 with a budget of around ballpark $10 million. It grossed $138+ million domestically. It placed 7th in the box office that year. The movie ahead of it was As Good as It Gets. The movie that plays behind it was Star Wars Episode 4, the special edition re-release, not the original. The number one movie that year, just pushing people out of the way and smacking them in the face or sinking them, was Titanic. IMDb gives this film an 8.3. I personally gave it an IMDb rating of a 9. Not to give any spoilers for my later ratings or anything like that. But Rotten Tomatoes, critics gave this 97%. Audience gave it 94%. It got 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Supporting Actor in Robin Williams, and one for Best Screenplay, written by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. It won 1 Golden Globe, nominated for 3 more. Got a Critics' Choice Award winner, number 1, and nominated for 2. Screen Actors Guild Award 1 and nominated for 3. MTV Movie Awards got 4. I think that'll about do it. So this really racked up the ribbons on the breastbone. Was it deserving?
Unquestionably. This is, I think, one of my favorite movies ever, honestly.
I think it deserves the praise it gets. I don't look at the IMDb scores or the critic scores before I watch any of these movies for a second, third, fourth time, or very frequently on the show, the first time. I knew that this had a lot going for it, and I knew that the world believed that it was elevated. And coming through on this watch through, I think I begin to see what everybody else was saying. Because when I first hit this, I was probably too young to really give it any credit. It's also impossible to ignore like the cultural references to this. Several scenes are, if not referenced, they're just flat out redone.
The chalkboard.
Whether it's a chalkboard, whether it's simply the "it's not your fault" line. There's several things that are from this movie as a basis. Like
the apples.
That's a rough one. That one is, unfortunately, sure. When you rewatch this movie, I think that the impact of it gets taken away with you like apples, how you like them apples. But yeah, it's impossible to have like ignored this movie or to not be aware of it, I think. But yeah, I had seen it before, but I think I had probably more like experienced it as referential more than I've actually seen it several times. I think I only have 1 or 2 other viewings under my belt.
Did you still enjoy it upon this viewing the same way, or do you think that it aged poorly?
The gift is that when I revisit something for the show, it's 9 out of 10 times the best viewing of it, and the most I get from it is when I get to watch it like homework a little bit, when I get to really focus. That's kind of the gift of this show.
Movies often demand that of you, but we don't always give that to them. And so once we do, we realize how much good stuff is there.
Every quarter hour, there's something building. It's deserving of its accolades, and I loved this rewatch.
All right, so Andreas, have you seen this before? Expectations? How'd you feel about it this time around?
This was one of my best watches. The first time I saw it was maybe too young. I don't know. I don't think too young to see it, but too young to fully appreciate it. Probably I was 8 or 9 and was just, this is cool, I guess. That guy's smart. On rewatches over the last couple of years, it's definitely solidified itself as a personal favorite, and seeing it this time was no exception. Super enjoyed it. Got emotional when the movie was emotional. It hit hard.
I've got an interesting take on this film. This film for a really long time has been a unicorn for me. To borrow the term from Gone in 60 Seconds. No matter how many times I sit down with every intention of watching this movie end to end, something always happened. Whether it was watching it on television, whether it was watching on HBO or whatever, something always happens. I had never sat down and watched this movie from beginning to end. I'm fairly certain I've seen the entire film in patchwork pieces.
Yeah,
but
I know what you mean.
Not in the same sitting. And I don't mean like, I watched half one day and half another day. I mean, like, I watched the first 45 minutes 9 different times. At some point, I came in like 30 minutes in and watched like another hour from there. It's about a 2 hour and 15-minute movie? 2 hour and 10 minutes?
Somewhere in there.
In that ballpark.
2:10.
And then I caught the ending a couple times, and I'm just like, okay, this is just driving me nuts. I've got to watch it beginning to end. This is nuts. I don't know if I've missed anything. But I just, no matter what happened, I mean, I'd start watching it, I'd get an hour in and be like, Buzz, you got to go do this. And I'm like,
all right.
As far as you know, he just gets jailed and that's it.
Yeah. So this is the first time that I watched all of it within, I'm going to say within a 24-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
And linearly, it wasn't just like snippet here, snippet here, snippet here, snippet there. So, yeah, this is weird. But I actually picked this because I was like, now I have to make myself watch it all at once.
I'll say for sure that maybe it was after the second or third. It took me a long time to remember or to figure out why Professor Lambeau was involved at all. Like I had forgotten kind of the first 25 minutes over time. And so coming back to it now and be like, okay, it has always made a lot of sense. I just missed it the first couple times.
There are there's definitely some integral pieces in the Matt Damon people of authority over him communication pieces that were lost the way I had seen it in the past. I literally jumped on. I bought this movie for this viewing because I was like, I'm tired of trying to find it free somewhere, catching it on television. Part of the reason that I failed so hard at watching this beginning to end for so long is because I just don't have it. So I'm going to get it, and then we're just going to knock this out. So, just fantastic movie. I knew it was a fantastic movie before, but it was so much better actually getting the clarity of watching it start to finish.
Some movies have the title or the acclaim of being considered fantastic. And this was one that I think solidified using that adjective today. Like when I was thinking about the movie and I was trying to zig and zag around the things that I loved and didn't love, I was like, wow, this was quite an experience.
One movie that I always kind of tie this one to, not because they have anything really to do with one another, but some of the plot pieces are the same, is Dead Poets Society. Dead Poets Society was one of those movies that I did and have watched end to end several times. And then because I sort of grouped these in a very similar place, it irritated me a lot that I hadn't gotten around to watching this one end to end. I watched 30 minutes of it before we got on here, just because I wanted to. So without further ado, take your time to pause, benchmark, do whatever you do to not let us spoil this film for you, because we're coming up on the plot summary and we're about to wreck it.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason, and this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
All right, we are back, and without further ado, we will be ruining this film for you. So the plot, Dustin.
Will Hunting is a talented savant working at MIT as a janitor who spends his free time yucking it up with the guys, dropping quarters at the batting cages, and solving high-level proofs meant for mathematics grad students. His work is noticed by Professor Gerald Lambeau, who, in an attempt to track him down, led him to the local jail, where Will is awaiting arraignment for nearly punching a guy to death. Now, Lambeau bails him out on one condition: that he meet with him weekly to go over big special math problems, and that he also attend counseling. After a few shrinks strike out in getting through to the closed-off, aggressive, and know-it-all nature of Will, Lambeau's college friend Sean McGuire is the right fit for the job. He confronts Will about the walls he puts up and reminds him that he is still young and has no real-world experiences, in part to his fear of being hurt or being wrong, identified as the reason he resists this pull from Lambeau, and he resists the closeness to his girlfriend, Skylar. Will recognizes his own genius but blows off lucrative job interviews before Sean kindles a friendship with him, fomenting a father-son-like relationship through shared past toughness, but he still closes off to Skylar as she moves away to California. After coming to grips with his past and his insecurities, realizing that those closest to him actually want him to succeed and to leave Southie, as well as walking in on Lambeau and Sean fighting over what's best for his future, Will's walls come down in an emotional embrace with Sean. He drives off in a new car bought for him by his buddies, and not toward a job offer, but to find the girl that challenges him, a soulmate perhaps, as Elliott Smith plays us into the credits.
Great stuff.
Right on. All right, so this is a pretty hardcore cast here. We've got some up and comers. Now we know them as superstars, but we have a bunch of up and comers here: Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Stellan Skarsgard, Casey Affleck, Cole Hauser, Matt Mercer. Minnie Driver. I mean, how do you feel about how these characters kind of played against each other or for each other in this fairly complex plot?
Well, I think I'll start with our two writers, right? Damon and Affleck. Easiest place to start is this story is special, but they needed it to be in the South Boston area. It needed to have the time spent with Casey Affleck's character and Cole Hauser's character. Like the time spent at the bar just kind of being buddies. I think the thing that maybe surprised me the most is Will Hunting's age is 20 years old through most of the film. But, this is something that like Boston people like to have this idea of what it's like to hang out with your Boston friends. And so I think I'll start there is that these two, you can tell on screen, if you didn't already know, that there's a sort of I don't want to say Philadelphia, but there's like a Boston brotherly love here between these guys.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Starting there as well with the two writers, I genuinely believe that the movie wanted Boston to be another character, which is a bit corny to say, but it's very clear that they knew where they wanted their movie to be set and they wanted it to have a voice within that. And I think they did a good job of that. Moving on to Robin Williams, his additions, I think, matched well, especially with his character supposedly being from that same Southie neighborhood as well. I saw that, or I read rather, that Robin Williams actually asked Matt Damon and Ben Affleck to take him out to some Southie bars in the production before the movie started. And in fact, they got rushed and got into a fight.
Can you believe it?
In prep to the movie, yeah. Especially with Ben Affleck, it seems. And Castle Rock Studios sent them a message saying not to let Robin Williams go to Southie anymore after that.
It makes me curious if Robin Williams was an instigator here. Like, I have always kind of long held that like 2 or 3 people that I would never want to get in a fight with. Ben Affleck's one of them. I just feel like Mark Wahlberg's another one. I feel like Mark Wahlberg could punch a hole through my chest.
I mean, we have receipts for that. Didn't he blind someone?
I that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't have any interest in being in a fight with several of these folks. I think I wouldn't want to get punched by Robin Williams. Honestly, that actually would do more damage to my soul than it would to my body. So,
Mr. Yeah, I bench 25. I bench 275. What do you bench?
I believe that. I am curious. I want to know how it started. I want to know the details. It's like watching 2 benches clear during a sporting event. I just want to know why.
I believe, if I recall, it started with a bunch of people swarming Robin Williams because he's a popular actor. And with Ben Affleck kind of pushing people back, then they started to get mad and stuff started.
Gotcha.
I think it really matters, Robin Williams' presence here. And Bryan, you mentioned the Dead Poet Society, but like with his style of care in this movie, his role as not just like therapist here, but as sort of a counselor and a mentor in a way, I will say I think it seemed like a stretch. They were doing a little bit of accent work with him, just a little bit, not enough to be distracting. And I'm glad they didn't like lean into it too hard. But talking about like the Boston as a character, they needed to tie him in somehow. I don't think it was necessary, but I'm glad that they got a reason to get this dynamic presence on the screen, because I would say it is Robin Williams' performance and his character, as well as Lambeau's character. I really like their different approaches and presentation of like different kinds of academics, which we can get into later. But aside from their characters themselves, Robin Williams' presence on screen really, I think, really is the key to how successful this movie was.
Yes.
If we wanted Affleck and Damon to make a Boston movie and we gave them a budget, they would, and it would be a cult classic probably, but it would not be at the level that this movie is without Robin Williams.
Go point to however many Kevin Smith movies you want to.
Yeah, I'm curious. I know this isn't something we really planned for, so if it takes more than a few seconds to think of it, what is your favorite Damon Affleck combo film?
Dogma.
I had a hard time not going with that one. I either that or Chasing Amy.
Is it funny to think about with those two that Affleck's like portrayal in some of those early movies, and then his gradual ascent to like trying to be taken more seriously, and clearly, even before Argo, but clearly he does. Then we get to like Batman with like he wants to be like known as a master of his craft. Whereas Matt Damon has taken the path where like he kind of ramped up to that quick and then wanted to I'm not going to say settle for mediocrity, but settle for not quite such highbrow things. He did some bits on 30 Rock. He shows up on SNL. The Martian it won its Golden Globe for best comedy or musical. Like his sites, their sites, even though they kind of started in the same place, have been a little different. And I like coming back to this 97 where
it was so
just
big for
kind
them.
of working with what they got.
I read as well that on their first day of shooting, with this being like really the first thing that Damon and Affleck made, one of the first scenes, if not the first scene that they shot, was just a scene of Robin Williams and Stellan Skarsgard talking to each other. And there were a bunch of tears in the room at that time because they were just thinking like, holy crap, these are two huge name celebrities reading our script. Isn't that insane?
I've got kind of an interesting take on this. I feel like Matt Damon has always had like the cameo funny thing in his blood. Like I'll take it back to Euro Trip and Scotty Doesn't Know. And that's in his heyday.
That's right.
Like, that's,
the lead singer
during the meat of what Matt Damon was doing. He took time off to be this punk singer in one scene with one of the weirdest, funniest songs ever. And then you fast forward to basically present day and him playing fake Loki on a stage production of Thor movies in a Thor movie. Like, I just feel like this is what Matt Damon does.
Doesn't Matt Damon have an ongoing bit with, is it Jimmy Kimmel? It's one of those late night shows where he kind of serves as the nemesis to one of these late night hosts. Sorry, it's not confirmed off the top of my head, but he has like shown up several times to like act as the foil for, essentially the type of widespread comedy of late night TV. Like you're right, he's always had that to him.
And I mean, and it's not that he doesn't do really, really like hardcore dramatic pieces anymore. I just think he sprinkles it in there with stuff that he wants to do and gets a jolly out of. So, you go back, let's just go back in the last couple years, you have movies like The Last Duel and Ford versus Ferrari that were, very heavily dramatic response places. But then you also have, Actor Loki, Jay and Silent Bob reboot, Deadpool 2. Just random stuff. And then I don't know what happened with the Great Wall, but there was that. you know, like, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you know what happened after the Great Wall? He did Ford versus Ferrari. So, like, who cares? It doesn't matter.
It feels like
or Suburbicon.
He loves to mess around, but also loves to make sure that we know that he's still fantastic. Like, I didn't watch, what was it called? Stillwater that came out this year? But
I didn't see that either.
I heard it was really good. Or, like, his contributions to Interstellar were fantastic, I think.
Yeah, Interstellar was great.
He just loves throwing stuff in there to show you that, oh yeah, this guy, he can act.
Right. And then he can do like serious silly too, something like Monuments Men. So, you know, it is what it is. So yeah, I don't really see he didn't pull a Cuba Gooding Jr. It wasn't, I got my Oscar, bleh, like here's whatever, you know, like he didn't just start doing anything and everything for money. And Ben Affleck, I feel like, has done the same thing. He's kept a fairly even keel with maybe a little bit less of the silly stuff. And I feel like that fits Ben Affleck as an actor, too.
I think Batman's pretty silly.
I think with Matt Damon here, we get he gets nominated for this performance, right? There's Matt Damon's performance, and then there's just Will Hunting, the character. Andres, do you like Will Hunting as presented?
I think
kind of a tough question.
In regards to, is this someone who you think we see consistently when people get to a certain level with him, that's when stuff starts to go sideways. Even with him blowing up a bit with Chucky in that one, in the scene at the scrapyard, whenever anyone tries to get to a certain level with him, he'll push back. So I think if it's just a buddy that you wanted to go have drinks with or whatnot, probably a nice guy, but I don't know if it's someone you could really get close to until he starts to figure himself out more.
You understand that he can begin to get prickly when you either get too close or when you start to, I guess you said it, there's like a level where like once you hit it, then it becomes completely unpleasant. And we see a lot of it in this movie. So like as the protagonist, I guess, as our guy we want to see succeed, he gives you a lot of reasons to show like he's immature or he's not growing. And that's what makes, I think, the progression of his character and the plot of the movie so rewarding, is that I don't think he's inherently likable in the first hour 15.
One might postulate, would anybody you first meet from Southie Boston be super presentable right off the bat, or in its longevity? The thing that I really like about Matt Damon's character in this, and Robin Williams like hits a nail on the head, is it's how you kind of approach friendship. I think you can put up a lot if you know that the people who are with you are ride or die. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about the grouping, the four amigos in this is, you know, he's telling Stellan Skarsgard later the reason he hangs out with these guys, the reason he loves these guys is because he knows any one of them would take a bullet for him. And there's a lot to be said for that. That level of comfort, familiarity, and loyalty is not only hard to come by, but it's frankly more impressive more often than not than a gigantic IQ.
I especially appreciated exactly how Sean puts it in the movie, where he doesn't say that they would take a bullet for him. He would say they would put a bullet in you.
Okay, well, let's talk about Gus Van Sant for a second. He is the director of this film. He has a couple other notables, but he is not, prolific per se as a director. So, how are we feeling about Gus Van Sant, Andres?
Well, the first fun thing to note that I realized is that this movie grossed more than all of his other movies combined.
I do not doubt that at all.
This was his big heavy hitter.
I'm curious how Damon and Affleck got hooked up with him, because I was going through his directorial information, and I was shocked by just how much of it is music videos. Like, this guy works a lot with musicians, and I would say well over half of his credits are music videos and documentary films on musicians.
The one right before this was To Die For with Nicole Kidman.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it was an artistic movie. And I think I remembered the thing about music videos. This movie is special, and I do hold it in high regard. But I think it was a combo with the Danny Elfman soundtrack, and I'm not like an architectural, like visual guy about like, you know, the streets that frequently. But I will say there's a lot in this movie. Maybe it's the crampedness of the rooms that they're in sometimes. But I do feel like this movie is artistic. It's not like avant-garde, but I feel like it's something that, even though I have not seen most of Gus Van Sant's movies, I feel like that's a staple of his, is highbrow art aside from just an entertaining movie. Because when the highbrow art also breaks 300 million, that's the rare combo.
The movie was almost not directed by Gus Van Sant, but rather by Mel Gibson, which, yeah, I don't know about that. Apparently, Damon and Affleck themselves talked Gibson out of being the director, and got Gus Van Sant instead.
I also wonder if I think it was 5 years later was Finding Forrester. I could just see somebody. I just see somebody like I could just see somebody walking up to Gus Van Sant and being like, "Yeah, all right, we want Good Will Hunting, but with Sean Connery now. We shall have a stately actor tutoring a young, naive person into fulfilling their potential in another film." Like, if you had told me he directed Almost Famous, that would have been more understandable to me, given his body of work. Do you think that his style of storytelling in here, I'm not sure if I can point toward a movie prior to Good Will Hunting that brought him to the attention of these two to make their movies.
For myself, there are a couple directors who the names are, for film fans, their household, but for casual fans, they might not be. And so, like, for instance, like Luc Besson for me, or Luc Besson, like that's a director who I will go see their movies, even if I am not pulled by the story or the trailer. And sometimes it's a swing and a miss. But so far, of only the handful of 4 or 5 of Gus Van Sant's that I've watched, I haven't caught a miss yet. They've been special. And I like, artistic movies, experiential perhaps. I think this one was boosted by the strong and unique story of the janitor savant who puts up walls against everyone. It's a combo of his style and also, credit to Damon and Affleck for this story. Even though we are focused mostly on Damon, I think Affleck's character and what he represents is extremely important to the success of this movie.
On previous watches, I was definitely missing Ben Affleck's true purpose in this film, as more than just the best friend. He ends up playing the role of basically the surrogate parent, kicking the child who's been in the house too long out, because given Will Hunting's upbringing and whatnot, no one else was there to do it. And call it the Silent Bob monologue that means so much more to the film than his silent presence. That go back and forth between him and Will Hunting at the construction site was so important to this film. I want to interject one other thing here. If Mel Gibson had directed this movie, the movies that he also directed that would have bookended either side of this would have been Braveheart in 1995 and Passion of the Christ in 2004. So this movie came out in 1997.
Wow.
So you would plug Good Will Hunting in between Braveheart and Passion of the Christ on Mel Gibson's directorial.
What a trilogy that is!
In an alternate universe, yeah.
I think we can all agree it's best it happened how it happened.
Yes. I wanted to add to your comment on the Ben Affleck's performance, especially during that construction site scene. I believe I read somewhere that his monologue about I really hope that one day I show up and you just aren't there, that you just left and didn't say anything. I believe that is the first thing that they wrote for the movie, period. That's where they started. And I think that makes a lot of sense because it feels so integral to everything.
Well, Andreas, it makes me think of something that I was actually going to save this sentiment until later when I ranked the movie. But I think it's easy to look at this as like Will Hunting's like story. But the way I like to look at it now is we've got 4 extreme forces on Will here. We've got Sean. We have Dr. Lambeau, or Professor Lambeau. We have Skylar. And then also Chuck. We have 4 people that care about Will so much that they are hungry to help him. A young man who really doesn't want any help. And I think that might be, it wasn't in the plot summary. It's the style. It's if you are, Andreas, saying that the first thing they wrote was like a tough love buddy to buddy statement, which is, I hope someday I walk up to your house and you're not there anymore. Like that by itself really shows like that's a special type of care. And so you have laser beams of care coming from whether it's best friend, whether it's love, whether it is ambition and skill, or whether it's just let the boy do what he wants to do. You have it coming from so many different directions. And that is what really made this special to me, is it's about the people that care for him, not about his own. Like nobody breaks down the wall by themselves. And I thought that was, upon this most recent viewing, maybe the thing that stood out the most.
That makes sense. I like that.
I realize per a lot of websites, and it could even be the film itself, how it does the cast in terms of appearance on screen. Did it bother anybody else that the entire barbershop quartet was listed before Minnie Driver?
It did. It did bother me.
It's just so stark. It's barbershop quartet 1 through 4.
Right.
3 MIT students and whatever. And then it's like, oh yeah, and Minnie Driver. And it's it's really just I don't know. I'm not a fan of them doing it that way. I like billing people in terms of importance to a film.
It's interesting you say that because initially the producers did not care to have Minnie Driver be in the movie as Skylar. Initially, they simply were saying that she was not pretty enough, which is, of course, psychotic.
Ridiculous. You know, she gets nominated too. And I'll say her performance is weighted towards the back half for me, because I wasn't quite sure what her role would be. You know, when I watched it as younger, I was just like, okay, love interest here. But, you know, I was trying to understand the importance of her care. And when she's getting emotional about Will not saying that he loved her back, that's some hard-hitting, you know, she's 27 at the time, or 26 at filming likely, playing a, you know, inheritance college student going to expensive schools. And we know that that's one of the things that like will kind of fight about is like the money. It's not about the money. But I think if we look at it from the very beginning, it really ramps up in either skill or stage presence.
So you're saying you weren't blown away by I could play basketball. I could be in the WNBA.
It's cute. It's pillow talk. That's all that was supposed to be.
No, she said NBA. I don't think there was a WNBA yet.
No, it's NBA. She could play in the NBA. She likes wearing shorts.
I see.
Will I play in the NBA?
Hook, dunk, dunk, she says.
Just decidedly so.
The classic British way of looking at the NBA. Hook, dunk, dunk. So, like, the pillow talk is fine.
It wasn't just the British view. That's what was going on in the NBA at that time.
Hook, dunk, dunk, as we all remember. So yeah, the in the toy store where they're doing the magic trick thing, like that's fine, and that's a dime a dozen. It's when she's sort of bearing her heart that really was well done on her part. And while you were talking just a minute ago, I was looking through her filmography. I realized that I know her, but I haven't seen her in a lot. I know her so well. I mean, the first thing I was gonna say was she gets the role of the diva Carlotta in the Phantom of the Opera movie, so she's got some pipes on her too. So like, I feel like I've seen her in more, but for some reason it's just I'm missing it. But I think she was deserved of her accolades in this as well.
She is actually her film listings is extensive. Like, I feel like she is for her age, she has one of the longest lists of, like, she's kind of in a lot of stuff, but not necessarily a lot of stuff that you've seen.
Yeah, she's still working too.
Yeah, I will forever remember her for and be, endearingly in love with her from Grosse Pointe Blank. So, yeah, that's top 10 movie all time for me. Absolutely loved it. And she's one of the primary characters who doesn't show up until well into the movie again for that one. So, that one will likely make an appearance as a dealer's choice at some point if it doesn't get shortlisted sooner or later.
Do either of the two of you know, is she, for Harvard, is she getting her undergraduate, or is she a graduate student and then going on to get her doctorate at Stanford later? Is it the second thing?
That was medical school. It might have been a residency at Stanford.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, because I mean, 27. Like she looks exactly like, because there's a certain amount of college students that are definitely childlike, and then there's the late seniors and the graduate students that are like, okay, no, these are just very young adults still. And I think she fits perfectly. It was believable.
There's maybe reading a bit too much into it, but I kind of took it as intentionally vague, seeing what part of school she's in, because it kind of feels like she's part of the whole like academia
merry-go-round
that Will Hunting just does not want to know anything about.
Well, two things on that, just context clues. Like, she is still in a dorm. That's part of it. He had to wait for other girls to come out before he could sneak. Hold that door. So she is still in the dorms. Two, she references organic chemistry, which Jess definitely did in undergrad. So I would say that there's a fair amount of evidence to say that she's an undergraduate student and was accepted into medical school, like general medical school at Stanford, prior to going to residency. Would be my guess.
This particular topic makes me think of, I think it's a discussion of organic chemistry when they're at the cafe. They are outside talking about, I believe she asks him at that moment, do you have a photographic memory?
Yeah.
And he begins to explain about how he is the way he is. Is there something about like Will Hunting's like superpower here that changes this movie for you?
You kind of just have to let the movie, just let him have it. Sure. And I think for this one, we're just meant to acknowledge, okay, the guy's smart.
I'm glad that there are people in his life that understand how special he is, though. And I think he does recognize it. Like, yeah, I know this stuff. This is, how easy this is for me. I loved that scene. He's got the Fields Medal winner on his knees, trying to salvage the burned paper. It really does make him special. I think this movie. Tell me what you think about this statement. This movie would be successful if he wasn't a 1 in 10 billion genius. If he was not quite that high. What do you think about that?
I like I don't want to call it an omnipotence piece, but I think that it adds to the tragedy of his upbringing that he was so downtrodden and destroyed as a young person that it took literally 3 of the greatest minds in a geographic area to pull him back to the assumption that he lives up to his potential. You don't actually, like, outside of the fact that they got him out of Boston, you don't actually get any more clarity onto what, I mean, he literally leaves a job that he accepted. So presumably he's still in a crap car driving west to a girl who may not accept him back.
What a fantastic ending I thought that was, where it had zero to do with the ability that he had. it was as simple as that part just didn't matter to what his choice was. And will he use it later? Maybe, but the point is he's actually made a choice finally.
Willing to be vulnerable, willing to go after the girl that challenges him. After listening to Sean, kind of realizing that maybe Sean's description of the way that he has lived his life without regrets has, I think, allowed Will to take the first step, whereas he typically would not want to. I know, Bryan, you're always the I want a little more guy. Do you like this ending?
Oh, no, I'm completely fine with it because nobody really gets what they want in this film. Like, many drivers left brokenhearted. Will is left seemingly in a better headspace, but with no general clarity to his future. Stellan Skarsgard is left holding the bag. I don't know what strings he pulled to do everything he did for Matt Damon, but basically, like, hey, like, he's got at least a dozen people calling up and saying, hey, remember that time that you wanted us to interview this guy and he came in and extorted us for all the money in our wallet? Like, he's not in a great space. I would say the only person that gets out of this film in a truly 100% positive way is Robin Williams'
Sean,
character.
Yeah.
And even that is fraught with, he's saying he's going to put his chips on the table, go and travel a little bit. Well, that's all fine and good. But, I think that the truly lovely thing about this film is that you're forced to find happiness in the unknown. People like to have a nice wrapped up ending where, someone's happy or everyone's happy. No one truly got what they wanted, but there's the promise of it.
Yeah, kind of a contentness with what is to come. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I wonder, because, certain comedians are known for this. I wonder if Sean's last line, he stole my line. I wonder if that was a Robin Williams ad lib if that was written for him.
I know that for certain. He was supposed to just chuckle and go back in, but he came up with that on his own.
It's good stuff.
I'm more curious, like, how much longer after this ending until they find Casey Affleck in a dumpster?
Morgan.
Cole Hauser's clearly got some serious alcohol abuse issues. I feel like that's got to be a thing coming up. Ben Affleck's wondering where he's going to end up marrying the chick with the missing tooth, and
there's no Irish curse.
He's going to turn around and wake up 50. The characters in this film are almost as compelling as the intellects. I'm as interested in their future as I am in the world breaking, And I'll also say one more thing, just because we didn't really get to talk about it. I feel like there were far too many, I'm not going to call them montages, but there are far too many cutscenes to Will sitting in his barren, stark apartment, basically reading a page every 10 seconds to say that he doesn't have a photographic memory. I would say that's 100%. I'd say that he doesn't maybe know exactly how to clarify that that's exactly what he has, but when he's reading every psychiatrist's book and whatever else, he's going through, I mean, he's turning those pages with the quickness. I'd say that photographic memory is a slam dunk.
Yeah.
Especially when he quotes line and page to Michael Bolton lookalike in the
Clark.
Yeah. So, I'd say photographic memory is a slam dunk, and that was either an evasion or not quite sure how he really wanted to address his talent.
When y'all were young, when y'all were 20 and younger, did you feel as if that you had a whole lot of answers and that the world was foolish for not have stumbled onto the answers that you arrived at sooner? Because I was, And when I was getting to college, I was like, I've figured a lot of this out. And man, it's great when you look back at like your 20 or 21-year-old self when you're 26 or when you're 30, and look back at like, it's a recurring thing. And this is another like theme of this, especially that Sean recognizes, that you really think you have all the answers. You really think you have, oh, well, I read all your books. Hey, I read your book, man. I know your stuff. Like, and that's like, you feel as if you are infallible. And I think that's represented in Will, is that like, well, yeah, I read this stuff, so I know. Or if I'm going to trash this painting because of some of the things, like, I think that's, I'm not going to say immature is the wrong word, but it's indicative of like the saying, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. I wanted to ask you two if you remembered yourselves at that age.
I guess I have a bit of a funny perspective within that question, being as I am 21 currently. I think you hit the nail on the head where it comes to that whole overconfidence of how much you know. Once you know a little bit, you feel like you've got it all, and until you learn more, you realize how much you don't know. It's very easy to get caught up in thinking, well, clearly we should behave this way. Why don't we? And it takes a lot of time to realize there are so many reasons why people choose not to do this, even if it may be a better choice.
I would say for me, I suppose if I went back in time, and
Bryan,
actually,
I am thinking, like, didn't you think that like you looked to your left and looked to your right and you were just like, I'm smarter than these schmucks. I know what I'm doing. Like, do you remember thinking that?
I've at times I've always said that I'm either the most optimistic nihilist in the world or the most negative optimist in the world. I've always kind of done self-reflection in terms of like categories of like 5 years, and to oddly quote a Reliant K song title, who I am hates who I've been. So
Really?
it's not necessarily that I think I knew it all, whether or not I came across that way or not, but it's more that as time has changed, I've self-reflectively gone back and really embarrassingly annihilated myself for a lot of stupid things. So I don't know really how to put it, because I don't feel like I ever felt like I knew it all, or I had some epiphical grasp on what's going on better than anyone else. It's more that I've, done a certain thing for so long that I'm like, oh God, I'm so dumb. Why?
Some of what you just said makes me kind of jump to my next point, which is Sean says to Will, you've never woken up with a woman and been happy. Or you've never loved. There are things that you haven't done. Like you look at a book, but you've never smelled the Sistine Chapel. Like there's so many things there of, old man kind of putting young man in his place, which isn't always well done. It's very well done here. It makes me think, well, I don't know how happy Will really was ever presented or content with anything. And it makes me think, how does he feel about this image that he presents of maybe aggressive and confrontational is the only way you can be that way with all that knowledge? The way that he goes up to Clark, at the bar in front of Minnie Driver and her friend. Like the only way to live with that knowledge or persona is to be aggressive or to be hanging out with other aggressive style people. Like it's a strange character. How do I want to put this? Like a view on how was he, because he's still so young. There's so much life ahead of you. It's like a drop in the bucket. So like to think of the reasons why he devotes so much time to reading these books and being this way. How long would it have lasted before? I mean, yeah, we do see him nearly punch someone's head off, but I think that was his only outlet.
That guy used to kick his ass all the time back in elementary school. So
how much longer did we have before? I mean, what's next if he doesn't get found and introduced to Sean? I don't really know. This is why I love this show. It's because it's more than just what we saw in the movie. It's thinking about these characters when they're well done, but what could have been or what would have been. And instead, we got to see the path diverted into still not a solid answer, just sort of what could be.
Might have been the Unabomber.
That's right. You heard of Ted Kaczynski?
No, who is that?
No, there's a ton of what ifs with this, and obviously someone with the grasp that this guy has on mathematics that could have ended very poorly one day. I think that's one of the real angles that this movie takes is not only is there a redemptive state to be had from a young person who had such a troubling upbringing, but, you have Sean who really needed the same. Like, you have to have both sides of that coin. You have the one who hasn't experienced and the one who's had so much experience that the weight of that world has crushed him. And they both free each other.
Yeah.
I feel like that too. I mean, how many shrinks do you know can say, oh, before we saved each other, this whole thing started with my hands around his throat. So,
I almost feel like it was.
We have a healthy relationship.
I almost feel like it was a necessary part of that relationship, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to know that he wasn't messing with someone that he could definitely push around physically.
Yeah, I think what you said about like them kind of saving each other. I the only thing that about Sean's life that I don't know if it was done on purpose. I think it's kind of a known thing, but they show him teaching at a community college like it's the worst thing. And it's a common media thing to be like, community college sucks. But in general, I'd like to go on the record and say, hey, it's good for a lot of people. And there's talented teachers there and there's talented students there too. But it's so common to be like, oh, because he's not at MIT, he's at the community college. Oh, his life must suck.
Which is directly what Lambeau thinks.
Yeah, and the movie shows you like his home life, like Sean's home life. It's lonely, it's messy, and he's looking at the bottom of the bottle probably a little too frequently. So they do enough to show you that like it's not going great for him, but he doesn't have to feel he's not the failure that Lambeau thinks he believes he is.
I also think you could kind of draw it as a microcosm or macrocosm to Will's situation, where you could say that Will has no problem working construction the rest of his life. It's an honorable trade. Well, Sean's working, teaching at a community college. That's an honorable trade. Like they both have basically, I don't want to say hamstrung themselves, because I actually believe in both of those statements, that both of those things are worthy things to be done by a person of any level of intellect. So, but they are both in a cycle, just different cycles of their lives. And
a different kind of mental prison.
Right.
Yeah.
And different reasons for it.
There are few movies where talking about the movie is as good as or better than watching the movie. This movie was very good, so I'm not going to immediately say it's better than that, but I really like this kind of delving into the character. And I don't know if it was by choice, maybe it's important to at least mention, but we do have the childhood physical trauma that both of our main leads kind of share. It's not something I want to particularly dwell on, but I do think it's important to the characters' histories, if not only for that they share it.
Did they ever actually go into where Stellan Skarsgard is from? Because I was trying to make a connection between, well, I mean, obviously he's Scandinavian, but I was trying to make a connection when I was going through my intricate weavings for my superlatives and stuff like that. Like, you've got Will Hunting, who is attracted to this British girl, and that's his main emotional connection in this film. Now, you have Sean's character with Robin Williams, where his wife has passed, so his main emotional connection in this is his old roommate, Stellan Skarsgard, presumably also foreign in some way. So I was just curious, and they both view that other person as as having more or been given more, or, presumably this, you don't understand what it's like to be us, to both. Even though Minnie Driver has lost her parents and all she has is the money she got from losing her parents, which was very traumatic in and of itself. But then you have Stellan Skarsgard's piece where also foreign, talking at them instead of to them. So I'm just kind of trying to, draw out the parallels.
I think there is something there. I don't remember the exact line, but in I believe the main scene of the big fight between Sean and Lambeau, Sean mentioned something like back in college where you didn't even know what side of the bed to piss on or something like that. It's like he just doesn't. So that makes sense that he was from somewhere else, did not know what he was doing.
Yeah, he said which side of the bed to piss off of, and I'm like, why are you pissing off your bed? Like, is this like a 90s thing? We used to put the bucket next to the bed so we didn't have to get up. Like, what?
Oh, you didn't do that in college?
No. I stumbled myself into the little closet bathroom that adjoined my room with my roommate's room. Not to get too graphic on air. You can cut this if you want. But my greatest defeat of college was taking a left turn instead of a right turn down the wrong highway and peeing into my Papasan chair, which was vaguely equidistant in the wrong direction from our restroom.
Oh no!
So that was my grandest college defeat in terms of peeing off the side of a bed.
Yeah. Oh man, I got into a physical altercation with a roommate for where he decided to pee, and I talked to him on the phone just 3 hours ago. What a crazy cosmic coincidence! Because he's getting married, and he wanted me to give a speech. So I said, "Okay, I will."
Well, I know what your speech has got to be, right?
Oh man, that might make the top 10 of the things we went through together. Yeah, I was thinking that I don't know where Gerald Lambeau is from, but I think part of the idea is that you can be completely unremarkable, and the type of talent that you have or the type of hard work that you put into, at grad school, you can either become a Sean or a Lambeau. And I think he came from someplace unremarkable. I don't remember it being important, and maybe it's important that it could be literally anything. It doesn't have to be some type of privilege. And I'm not certain that we really even needed to know the privilege of Minnie Driver's, Skylar's inheritance. I don't know if it added much except for fuel for a later argument. But that argument was impactful regardless of the inheritance part.
I want to say that the importance there was simply that it's someone that Will sees in a very one-dimensional way of this is a rich person and does not think about those extra levels. Even when he understands that she's an orphan, he doesn't. That's not something that his brain immediately goes to. He's thinking she's just a rich person. She doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lesson of the movie, though. I, in myself included, I don't think that anyone ever really does attempt to delve deeper into another person's, ghosts. All of these people that we're talking about in this film have an investment in someone else in this film. So whether it's Lambeau and Sean in Will, or Will in Minnie Driver's character and vice versa, but it forces them to say, okay, what are the skeletons in the closet? And when faced with them, they do or do not try to deal in appropriate ways. Well, that's true of the person who, is behind the counter at your local gas station too. So I don't think there's anything particularly special about Will and Sean's issues with domestic violence as children, but it clearly shaped who they became for better or for worse. But it's not something that gets delved into for any other reason than shared experience in this film. And I think one of the messages of the film is you see people and they come across as cocky or arrogant, dismissive or anything like that, but you have no idea what lies behind that.
Well, I mean, let's look at, and I don't want to step on anybody's superlatives, but maybe one of the more aside from the "Do you like apples? How about them apples?" Aside from that, maybe the most alluded to scene from this movie is the repetition of "It's not your fault" at the end, at nearly the end, and I suppose this is like a pickaxe at the wall. Then again, I mean, Will has already opened up so well with Sean, but that repetition, like, that's a special scene. That scene it doesn't exist on the page, like in dialogue. Well, it's more than the sum of its parts. Robin Williams, Sean, like, gradually approaching with repeating it, and Matt Damon's real like expressions of emotion are incredibly powerful. And then we get just a little pan out shot, not nothing crazy, but like it's very impactful. But I have to think that results back to that shared experience.
I have a bit of a funny story with that scene, honestly. Recently, about a year ago, I made my best friend watch this movie, and there are we are both people that are prone to being more emotional during movies, especially when watching them for the first time. Uh-huh. And so there's certain movies that we'll watch alone rather than together because that's just a better setting for it.
Safer.
Yeah.
You don't want to cry with your bro?
Well, sometimes, but that very much occurred during this scene, and neither of us really expected that to happen. And it was very surprising to suddenly go, "Oh, yeah, we're here now."
Yeah, I'm like that when Boromir calls Aragorn his king.
I want a tally of how many times you've cried over a Sean Bean death. Not again.
I cried when he was fired in The Martian.
There are 3 tiers to Sean's involvement with Will that I could tell. One was acceptance. You go through the whole thing. We're in a staring contest. We're in a game of silences where he's like, he has got to be the one who talks first. So that's number 1. Number 2, they get into this place where they're buddies. He talks to him like he's just another guy from the block. And make no mistake, my biggest takeaway from the end where Will's driving away, no matter what greatness he goes on to, he is still Jenny from the block.
I don't know, Ben. I don't know how Ben Affleck did it, man. I don't know how he did it, man.
When he gives that forgiveness piece, that was him doing his job. Like, he befriends him. He gets past that icy exterior. That's not what his purpose was there, to be his buddy, to be the guy he gets to talk to so he stays out of jail. And he breaks through that next wall, that third wall, to get to the point where he's saying, look, you need to absolve yourselves for these perceived sins of the past because you were stabbed and beaten by someone who had power over you. So there were really 3 stages to this, and there were 3 stages to this movie. And you see, Matt Damon stumble his way, as he should, given, the traumas, stumble his way through those 3 stages into, a frankly driving off into the sunset ending, which isn't a happy ending in the way that you see him with the girl, with the good job, with the, changing the world, but just the hope that you're leaving these characters in a better place. Except Stellan Skarsgard, which I'm fairly certain I don't think he got anything out of this outside of some people mad at him.
Maybe he can afford to be dropped down a peg, though, man. I don't remember that many professors getting applause when they left a room. He's got a hand-man always walking around. He's got a personal assistant that's a little performance too.
Who's frankly horrendously jealous of Will Hunting.
I know, man.
This poor guy. Like, he's a henchman. He's 100% a henchman. And, you know, and he wouldn't be that henchman if he wasn't incredibly bright himself.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people
Like,
get lucky.
he wouldn't.
Sometimes people get lucky, right? He says something else too, which is like, yeah, from what I can tell, he really likes to work with you instead of just like work against you.
Yeah.
There's some real for the 3 lines that dude has. There's some real emotion there.
But I will say this too. Like, I never got the impression that Stellan Skarsgard was ever using. Like, I never got that impression. It was always like, do you understand you can change the world and you could be so much better than me? And, you know, it was always, I'm a stepping stone to elevate you. And I feel like a lot of people in academia would see that the opposite way. Like, he would view that person as a threat. So
yeah,
the one nice thing about this is the only antagonist in the entire movie is the protagonist.
Yeah, and everybody is wanting to help them with seemingly no strings attached. Like it could easily have been like, especially for Skarsgård, it could easily be like, oh, Lambeau is actually looking to milk this prize cow. No, he's actually just trying to. I mean, it is like, I want you to take this path because it was my path. I mean, it's selfish in that way, but he does it because he sees the good that can come from it for Will, and that's why, you know, when I mentioned 30 minutes ago that you have 4 different sources of care, and sometimes, like, you know, movies don't do a great job with friendship sometimes, but this one does, and this one has just the right amount of romantic love. You know, we don't have too much, and then you have 2 like competing mentorships in a way. That was really special.
And I think it irritates Skarsgård that Sean is able to do what he can't. And, you know, after he goes through the litany of people that he not necessarily respects more, but you always have that person that you're less inclined to ask for help, even though that might be the exact right person to ask for help. And like that, I feel like Skarsgård and Williams's interchange, their dynamic in this film is almost more compelling than the story of Will Hunting.
On my most recent watch, I was showing the movie to my girlfriend, and that seemed to be the part that she was most interested in the movie. Actually, was their relationship.
And I will say this: you have the South Boston quartet and how they interact with each other and how they befriend each other and the way they communicate. And then you have the ex-MIT alumni way where I swear it was straight out of one of those bar scenes where he walks in and he goes, "Listen, Sean, I know. Me too." Like, that's I swear that is something that only happens with men. It's so funny to me. I watched that scene a couple times. I rewound it a couple times with this grin on my face because it's one of those things where you could have a fist fight with a good friend the night before, wake up the next morning, both of you with an ice pack on your face and be like, "Hey man, yeah, I know. Me too, bro. Me too, man."
Hot coffee over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's, it is something that only happens in certain vacuums. And I feel like that it is equal in every way, shape and form to the friendships that Will has with his Southie friends.
Yeah, and you know, not everybody interacts, but there is a lot of interaction outside of our protagonist-antagonist, which is you do have the great relationship between Sean and Lambeau. You have Skylar interacting with the 4, like the friends at the bar, which is a great little scene. Now, you don't have Skylar interacting with the 2 older gentlemen, but like aside from that, this world does seem small, and they interact with one another.
Indeed. So, how do you feel about jumping into some superlatives?
I like it.
I'm all about it.
All right, so we will kick this off with our MVP. Andres?
I can't pick anyone other than Matt Damon. His performance was so key to this. He's the one who started it, him with Affleck, of course. And I think it's clear that it was his movie. I always think of this as the Matt Damon movie, so he has to be my MVP.
Dustin, who is your MVP?
Robin Williams. I think I connected with his character the most. Bryan, you might know I used to teach, and I used to think that the biggest impact I could have was a student like outside of the classroom, and it seems like that's so his thing. And it's I could probably gush on and on. I don't have to. We know how good his performance was. So for me, it's Robin.
I picked Robin Williams too. I'm curious though that given the age difference between you and I and Andreas, if we would have chosen one of the younger characters.
Yeah.
If we had done this 15 years ago.
Would I have picked Morgan? I don't know. He's wicked funny.
I think almost all of Casey's lines were ad-libbed. I don't think he had a script.
I scarily enough believe that's true.
The VCR's in your mom's room. You got another VCR?
That's such an awkward scene. I was just like,
it really is.
Why does he have a baseball glove? I was like, come on.
It's my little league glove.
You know, someone tried to cut that scene, and they went, "No, we need it.
No way, we must keep that in."
My God. All right. Best supporting actor, Andres.
Again, for the same reasons as before, I had to go with Ben. The two of them making this felt so important. I don't often have instances in which I say I like Ben Affleck or love him. And so I had to go with Ben and for the support.
Dustin, supporting.
Minnie Driver, particularly the second half. A lot of emotion, heartbreak. She gives him an ultimatum kind of thing. I need to hear you say you don't love me, and he says it. And I know it's becoming a trend on this show that like Dustin seeks out despair, but add heartbreak to the list because if it's done well, it really pulls at the heartstrings. So Minnie Driver.
I went with Stellan on this.
Yep.
This watch, this being my first full watch end to end in one sitting. I literally just sat on the Robin Williams, Stellan Skarsgård dichotomy, and I just couldn't get over it. Like that was the heart of this watch through. So I'm wondering if I did this more often, if I got the opportunity to watch this through and through, if that would change over time. But that's the one that really got me through this watch through. A hidden gem, Andres.
I went with Elliott Smith. I almost made Elliott Smith my MVP, which is incredibly biased, but I am such a huge fan of his and love what he brought to this movie. I love the picks they went for the movie. They didn't stick with the classics, though Angeles hitting, especially when Skylar is flying to Los Angeles, was incredible. But they put in No Name number 3, I think it was. One of the no names.
It's unmissable when his voice comes on. For sure.
It's not my hidden gem, but I'll agree with you on this that I actually added Angeles to my somber playlist. Dustin, hidden gem.
The guy who plays Clark, the dude who gets owned at the bar, he was perfectly cast as a guy with a punchable face. So,
and that straggly blonde hair that's
awful, absolutely dreadful.
He looks like a villain in something that gets hit with gamma radiation and ends up being Hulk's nemesis.
Wormtail.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. For my hidden gem, I went with Cole Hauser, the most mute of the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck friends. Mainly because he went into a fairly stark prominent role phase in a lot of pseudo horror movies in the 2000s. So he got fairly popular for a while. He disappeared for a hot minute, and then he came back jacked out of his mind and is crushing it right now as a character in Yellowstone. So let's do the difficult questions. Let's do recast. Dustin.
I think that little assistant dude, Tom, should be recast. John Mighton is who is in the role, but I think he could be more powerful. I think the lines that he's given are pretty good. So I was thinking of the first name that came to my head was Alan Cumming. I'm like, no, that's too big.
Oh, yeah.
It's way too big. So then I was thinking of the guy who plays Zepp in Saw. The actor's name is Michael Emerson. I believe he had a successful TV career in Lost and then Person of Interest. He's a recognizable face, but essentially just it's a little more pop to Tom's character.
I like the Alan Cumming one, personally.
I think he'd be too loud. I think, but I mean, he could do it well. I think using him.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there could have been a little bit more personality to
Maybe
that
the first instinct was right. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Andres.
I struggled a lot. I was literally thinking about what I would recast all the way throughout the episode because I think everyone really does their job pretty well up until characters that are small enough that it doesn't even matter. Like, well, would I recast Raj, the guy who just goes, no way I could do that equation. So my recast comes from morbid curiosity than someone who I actually want to not be in the movie. But I would love for Morgan to be played by DiCaprio. I want to see him be just a freaky little guy. But that's going more so in time frame.
I also took a swing at Casey Affleck because I honestly, the second most punchable face in this film is Casey Affleck. I don't like him. I never have. He's on my top probably 10 people I don't want to see in movies. I replaced him with another sibling on purpose from Boston. I replaced him with Donnie Wahlberg. So I think that if you wanted an obnoxious Bostonian, I feel like that would still work, but it adds a little bit more muscle to the crew. He's a little bit thicker guy. So I just think it would be interesting if he wasn't quite so ratty and was a little bit more bleep you like the rest of them. Let's go. I'm going to get this one out of the way because I feel like there's got to be a cardigan or a scarf in someone's answer. Best wardrobe or makeup moment, Dustin.
I was going to go with Lambo's scarf because I actually accessorize with a scarf. But instead, on this watch through, Will is wearing like an awesome Cobra jacket during one of the first meetings with one of the other psychiatrists. And I was just like, oh, that stands out. It's like red and yellow. Like it's a cool jacket. So I'm going with that one this time.
Excellent. Andres?
I actually have a big hot take with this one. I am here to defend Matt Damon's hair. I love what his haircut looks like in that movie. I think it adds to the character. And I just like how it looks. And it seems that I'm pretty alone on this because fans didn't like it. Even Matt Damon himself went back years later and apologized for it. Said, "Oh yeah, I was young. I thought it would look good. Maybe I'm young and also thought it would look good, but I dig the haircut."
Said every child of the 90s. Like every single one of us said, "Oh, this is it right here." The one saving grace is I don't have a single picture because I never did it with frosted tips. Thank God. Like I'm still like,
hey, I did it in the 2010s, but just as a joke, really.
I got crushed by the 80s. I had a bowl cut. It was horrendous.
I had a bowl cut. Yeah.
I'm all Stellan Skarsgard's wardrobe in this. Recently, within the last 5 years, I have found the wonders of drapey, comfortable clothing. So whether it's a cardigan, scarf, whatever, 3/4 length, give it to me. I absolutely love it.
That gray flowy thing you own, Bryan. I've had so many people comment about it to me about
Positively?
You. Yes, in a positive. Well, it gives you Paul Atreides vibes, and I know that you know that.
Well, yeah, I'm game for that too. Brings us to best shot, Andres.
I guess if I had to pick the specific shot, it would be the overhead during the scene where Sean's talking about the baseball game that he didn't go to because he was meeting his wife. I learned that office is meant. It was built to resemble a baseball diamond, so that when he's running around the bases, it really feels like bases. And in that shot of him just going around and they're having such a good time, I think that was a fantastic shot, one of the most dynamic in the movie, and I think it works really well. So that's mine.
That's a good choice. Yeah.
Agreed. Dustin.
After Sean tells Will that his wife would fart when she was anxious, they both start laughing. And even though I'm getting the reputation of being like a sad boy, seeing the joy on their faces was really good. And I can't pick between the zoom in on Robin's face or on Matt's face, but it represents like a turning point in their relationship, and I thought it was great. So that's my shot.
So my best shot is Sean taking his glasses off. I feel like the vibes that Robin Williams puts off as his character still hold that same gravity that, the other shrinks that he goes to, and I understand that might come across as derogatory. The other psychiatrists that he visits, they're all trying these different methods and whatnot. He's basically sniding all of their attempts. This one, who's in an office at a community college and genuinely trying to connect with him, you needed that point of, I don't need this, I don't need you, but you just might need me. Folks, if you ever have an argument with someone and they take their glasses off, that's not a good sign, guys. That's, as a glasses wearer, if I take my glasses off in an argument, that's not a positive, like, you're not making headway. Let's just put it that way. Let's go with best scene. Dustin.
It's kind of the dressing down. Sean telling Will about all the things that he doesn't know and that he doesn't have experience in. It is a long scene. It's not a long scene. It is a long, continuous shot, but that scene in particular, because they're outside of the office, I think it's a point before the best shot that I just gave, but it's sort of showing you that Sean is a match as far as wits go for Will. I thought that was important.
Agreed.
It's worth noting also that bench by the lake is now a Robin Williams memorial that a bunch of fans visit.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool.
My best scene, unsurprisingly, is It's Not Your Fault. I think that is the scene that puts this movie above from a great movie to an exceptional one. They said so much with obviously so little, so that has to be my best scene.
So for me, the best scene was Robin Williams talking about regret. It's more of a monologue love than it is a scene love, because we have so many impactful scenes coming from that room that it's hard to pick one of them, because they're all, there's a lot of gravity to each. But the monologue specifically, and then how it ended, it was a great back and forth. Change one thing, gentlemen. Dustin.
I started writing a big thing about how the scenes with the boys, like at the bars, are just such a completely different tone sometimes, especially the one where Casey Affleck comes down with the catcher's mitt on. Like, some of them are just way out of there, but I realized, nope, the movie needs it. Don't change it. I love it. So what I decided to change was, I think Skylar needs a different reason for having to go away, or we don't have her be so head over heels for him. Like the as far as the filmmaking goes, it's really over the top with her clinging to Will and looking around for him when she's at the airport and saying "I love you" again over the phone. Like, I think that's maybe a step too far. I'd like for there to be a little more conflict there, because he did enough to lose some respect in that relationship. I think that I'd like to see that on screen. Otherwise, it's not big enough to like really mark this movie down, but I think that's a good change.
You're punching a wall near my head. This is probably not going to be the healthiest relationship. I should probably also move on. So, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there to unpackage. Change one thing, Andres.
There's so little that I want to change in here. It goes back to the curiosity of how could things go differently. I'm very curious, and I love what the character does in the movie, but I'm very curious what would happen if Skyler wasn't in the movie at all. If we didn't have that be the passion that he follows, like what else would he have stuck to? I would like to see where that movie went if we simply omitted that aspect to it.
For me, I would have liked to have seen at least a more fleshed out idea of where Robin Williams and Stellan Skarsgård go after this. Like, he's going to be traveling. They talked about it. I'm honestly more I'd like to know where Robin Williams ends up more than. So without actually asking for more, which I'm clearly famous for, I don't necessarily need more to this film, but I would like to know maybe more about his landing.
Yeah, and it does make you think, because the movie is only 2 hours 6, so like you could maybe do a little bit more, but even if it was just to see them both on vacation or something, who knows what it is, but there was a lot of care and love with the last 10 minutes of this movie. It wasn't a slow peter out. Like there's some impactful moments in that small amount of time. So in order to keep that impact with another button or stinger on there might be difficult, but I agree with you. That would be nice. It's nice to see what hand he's dealt when he says he's willing to gamble again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that whole piece on him actually saying, I learned from, something from this as well. Best quote, Dustin.
Look, you're my best friend, so don't take this the wrong way, but in 20 years, if you're still living here, come over to my house to watch the Patriots game, still working construction, I'll kill you.
Andres, what's your best quote?
I can't get enough of, why don't you give me your 16 cents you got on you, and we'll put your sandwich on layaway. There you go. keep it right up here for you. Put you on a program. Every day you come in with your 6 cents, and at the end of the week you have your sandwich.
That's good.
I am also sticking with the boys on this.
Nice.
You get canned more than tuna.
That was my second. That was my runner-up. How did you get fired for pushing a broom? You got fired pushing a broom. No, they had a
restructuring. It was a restructuring.
I love that. I believe we managed to go no cursing for this full episode, but all three of our quotes had to have a minute. You can't have a good quote in this movie without it.
Right.
Yeah, they were restructuring all the idiots out of the company. All right. Well, again, thank you, Andreas, for joining us.
Yeah.
And on a 5-star rating scale, half-star accepted, your rating is?
I would give it a 4.5.
4.5. And Dustin?
I'm actually going to go even higher to a 5-star movie. The ways that these, I mentioned it earlier, but this was the crux of why I like it so much, is how much people care about Will and how it takes him a long time, but he does let some of that in. I kind of gave this away earlier, but I think it really culminates well on top of a stellar Robin performance. So it's 5 stars from me.
Excellent. I also went 5 stars. I will say that some of that comes from actually finally finishing it end to end in one sitting. And there's something profound about this movie. It's very deserving of its accolades. It's a deep movie, but it's also, I find this to be a rewatchable. In a film that's really about people, I find this to be a very compelling film. So yeah, I went 5 stars on this too.
Yeah, great scores.
Dustin, you want to help me pick out a movie for next time?
I've got 3 options for you here, Bryan. I'm going to go through them right here. Number 1,
sure.
Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close from 2011. A 9-year-old amateur inventor, Francophile, and pacifist searches New York City for the lock that matches a mysterious key left behind by his father, who died in the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. Option 2, Network from 1976. A television network cynically exploits a deranged former anchor's ravings and revelations about the news media for its own profit, but finds that his message may be difficult to control. Finally, Option 3, District 9 from 2009. Violence ensues after an extraterrestrial race forced to live in a slum-like conditions on Earth finds a kindred spirit in a government agent exposed to their biotechnology. What's it going to be?
I'm always a sucker for journalistic film, so we're going to go with 1976's Network.
That's got to beat your broadcast news score, so yeah, I'm down for it.
Yeah. All right, well, Andres, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's mostly audio only, but we're working on making that you get to see the faces and the disasters sometimes. Give us a like on Facebook, Instagram, and follow us on Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing for this podcast is fun but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go toward making the show better for you and our listeners. As always, thank you for listening, but be good to each other and watch more movies. Dustin?
A case with 4 stones in it. Not 1 or 2 or 3, but 4. 4 stones. What the hell am I supposed to do with an empty case?